So let's start off with the basics. First of all, I asked you to come in just because we are working on interviews in everybody's different professional fields. One of the things that we kind of talked about is whose job is it to teach writing in the professional fields? Is it my job as the writing instructor, or is it their prospective professors in the different fields? And everybody is going to interview somebody in the field that they're interested in joining about writing and about communication. And I think a lot of people also have questions about, like, how do I get there? So if you wouldn't mind, let's start off with a little bit about, tell us about you and what you do, who you are and what you do.
So I'm Hannah Ebner. I went to college in Minnesota at a small school. I was an English major, so there was a big focus on writing, but not professionalism. And after college, I came home to Tucson, where I'm from. I'm from Tucson. And I taught for a Montessori school, which is a different kind of style of teaching. And eventually I did my Montessori teacher training. I taught in Montessori schools for about 8 years in a few different states. And eventually I worked for a meditation nonprofit for a while, and now I'm starting a private practice on my own. Yeah.
In meditation, right?
Yeah, meditation and trauma resolution. Yeah.
Yep. So now I'm going to open the floor to you guys. What questions do we have?
I actually have a question for you for the interview. Are we going based off of the thing we made last week?
Yeah, you might make revisions to it, but yeah, more or less.
I have a question then. Good morning, first of all. And then my question is how did you go from majoring in English to now having a professional career in meditation?
Good question.
or why, I guess you could say.
Yeah. So majoring in English, I had kind of a Dead Poets Society vision of myself becoming an English high school teacher, if you've seen that movie. And I didn't end up enjoying my education classes so much, and so I just didn't get a degree in education or a teaching license. And I grew up with Montessori. My mom has a Montessori school here in town. And so after college, I was like, what am I doing with my life? And I wanted to work with kids. That struck me as something that would be meaningful no matter what kids I was working with. And so then that kind of started me on the teaching path, even though I had turned away from the education world a little bit. And I was right, working with kids is the best. I recommend it highly. And just sort of life stuff happened. I went through a rough breakup and I needed support, and so that was when I found meditation. I had a friend teaching a meditation class, and so I started going to that in spite of my own tremendous skepticism about it. And so it's been about 7 years that I've been meditating, and I ended up pursuing training in meditation. The thing with my teaching career, I didn't love the academic skill building part of it, which theoretically is pretty central to the whole thing, but I did love the kind of emotional, social, and spiritual development with the kids that work in that field. So the point that I'm at now, I'm trying to figure out how to make that part of it my source of income and my professional track. Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of just piggybacking off that, how did your experience going through a couple education classes and that kind of thing help you with your business now?
The education classes didn't help at all. Just kidding. Actually, that's not true. It was the last day of my educational psychology class, and the professor was great and really inspired, actually. And her big kind of message at the end of that class, geared towards teaching, was to experiment all the time, just continually try new things, see what works and see what doesn't. And that has had a good impact on the way that I've approached my adult life, just sort of like throwing spaghetti at a wall to see what sticks kind of experimenting mentality. Yeah, but other than that, I would say the education classes didn't have a lot of bearing on my life in general.
They're brutal, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah, and I didn't take very many. I took a couple and I was like, I don't want to do this thing. Yeah. Yeah.
So on your current path that you're taking, do you have a lot of support from like friends and family?
What a sweet question. Yeah, totally.
So they all back you up 100% of what you're doing?
Yeah, for sure.
That's good.
Which is great. Yeah, especially because there's a way in which it's unconventional. I'm basically working in a therapy field, like mental health stuff, without the like proper licensure. And I'm upfront about that with clients especially, but people in general. But I have, various trainings that have all kind of woven together. Education classes, so my Montessori training has had like a huge impact. And so, yeah, there's a way in which it doesn't make sense what I'm doing, but then also it's totally like the culmination of all the different things that I've been learning over time. Yeah, and my friends and family are super sweet. Yeah.
You said that your Montessori training had like a bigger impact on you than your education training. Can you just like briefly explain what that Montessori training entailed?
Yeah. So just an overview of Montessori and what that means. So the philosophy of education is about hands-on learning, mixed age groupings, and self-direction. So the students, the way it works at my current school, we have like a whole group lesson in the morning where the teacher shows how to use different hands-on materials, and they're academic materials, so like math manipulatives and all the different subjects. And then the students have independent work time where they're moving around the classroom. There's materials like on shelves around the room. And I mean, the mixed ages thing, we have generally 3 different age groupings in one room, and so they get to have, role models in the older kids, and the older kids get to have some leadership. So my Montessori training, you go through all of the different hands-on materials and learn how to present them and what they're for, but then there's this really beautiful kind of underlying philosophy about how to best cultivate the human potential, basically. And so the idea is that with freedom in the classroom, by learning with the senses and hands-on materials, people are able to, by people I mean children, are able to self-construct, is what Maria Montessori wrote about. There's this nice way that they're able to stay curious and be inspired and joyful about learning, without having to learn this kind of constant obedience to authority and sitting in desks all day, which is maybe cool for college kids, but little kids need to move around. So that actually sort of sparked my interest in spiritual work, honestly, because I didn't grow up with spiritual stuff, apart from Montessori, I guess, which was in the background for sure, but yeah.
I know you talked about how you like gradually moved into meditation and practicing it, but was there like some type of like epiphany you had like along the way that like just like made you want to like, this is what I want to do? Was there just like a single moment that you can contribute it to?
That's a good question. An epiphany moment. So during my Montessori training, one of the lessons that we teach in the elementary curriculum is about stellar nucleosynthesis. So like the, sort of the life cycle of a star. And the lesson, you're like unrolling this thing that's showing the process of, elemental whatever going on in the star. And then at the end, you like fling open the last bit and like spray out like a bunch of, in my thing that I made, it was like buttons or whatever, but to represent the elements, the periodic table. And that lesson was like so inspiring to me. And so that was an epiphany moment about just sort of like the universe and like the way that we teach children, and like it was just beautiful. So that was a little bit of an awakening moment for me. Not to anything specific other than I think just my deeper sense of purpose, like what I think is meaningful about working with children and humans in general. But as far as meditation goes, that's been kind of a more stumbling path. I didn't think I would like meditating. I didn't like meditating for a while. But then there have just been, I think, like smaller moments actually along the way of like feeling connected to my community, or I've had some specific meditations that were important. But in terms of kind of my professional track with meditation, so I was working for this meditation nonprofit with the teachers that I've been studying with until June of this summer, and I quit with the intention of like letting myself get bored for a while. I was lucky to be able to do that, and so instead of like a cool epiphany moment, I got bored, and then I waited kind of to see what emerged from that. And actually, just in the last like week, I've actually started getting excited and like having that feeling about what I'm doing. Not that I was like unexcited, but just I was kind of listening, you know, just waiting.
Take a step back and just watch how things play out.
Yeah, letting it unfold a little bit. So, yeah.
And did anything unfold after that whole hiatus with you?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. So as much as I was theoretically like doing nothing or whatever, it was percolating, and I was doing different things. So like I built my website over the summer. I highly recommend Squarespace. It was great. And, you know, I've just been talking to people about it a little bit and starting to, you know, send out my information. There's like a Southern Arizona therapists like community. And so, you know, some clients have started to show interest, and I have some people on my schedule. And then last week, the thing that got me kind of excited, I was looking for an office space. And so I found this like funky building with this little cheap office space in it, and, you know, started looking on Craigslist for furniture for the office and that kind of thing. So yeah, so that's what's been rolling.
It's amazing how space can be so amped up. Yeah. Sorry.
Totally, yeah.
In the aspect of you getting to where you are with your career, do you have any regrets?
I mean, part of me feels like I should have pursued a degree of some sort in mental health. My issue with so I went to a liberal arts college where, you know, you're encouraged to just like explore a little bit and take whatever classes. So I was taking education classes initially, and I took psychology classes also, but was also like super uninspired by my psych classes. And what felt like was missing from actually both the education and the psych classes in retrospect, like I wasn't aware of this at the time, but there wasn't a spiritual approach. There wasn't like a kind of mystical care for the human spirit. And I think that's what I was looking for. I'm totally drifting from your question. What did you ask again?
If you have any regrets.
Regrets, totally. So on the one hand, I don't think I would have found what I was looking for necessarily in mental health, although later I worked with a Jungian therapist myself, and I think pursuing a degree in Jungian counseling would have been amazing. So if I had kind of figured that out sooner, I might have done that. But generally, I don't have professional regrets. I think there was a phase where I felt like, where is this all leading? Like, what am I doing? I'm, feeling kind of uncertain. But at this moment, like allowing for some of this unfolding kind of idea, I've been able to see and gain perspective on how the different things that I've done and decisions that I've made are leading towards a good thing that
Yeah.
feels meaningful.
So let's try and transition into some of the questions about communication and writing.
How do you usually present your information to your customers or people that don't really know what your career is about?
So this is a good question for me right now. It's been really difficult, honestly, for me to figure out how to explain what it is that I'm doing now, because it's not therapy. Yeah, and truthfully, like even yesterday, I was trying to talk to somebody about it, and I was like, this isn't making any damn sense at all. But so working that out. For Montessori, I'm part-time at my mom's Montessori school now as an administrator, and I do admissions for the preschool. So it's these, parents coming in with their, first little tiny kids, and they're just starting to explore what education might look like for their kids. And, adults who don't have a background in education, like a lot of them don't have any idea what Montessori is or anything. And so that's a fun conversation. We have, I should have said that, a brochure about Montessori for them as like just a little resource. And so in the education world, it feels a little clearer to me, and a lot of it happens through conversation, basically. But then when I was working for the meditation nonprofit, I was doing their email marketing primarily, and yeah, and it was my first like adult job is what it felt like, even though it was 2 years ago. Just because I wasn't working with kids and I was dealing with kind of like a wider audience. And so I ended up, writing a lot of like kind of fluffy spiritual emails, one of which I sent to Kelly. Yeah, so anyways, you might get to read it.
I will send it out to you guys. Right after class. I'll send it out to you guys right after class.
Cool. Yeah, so one thing that's been a little goofy on my path is that I've worked in these fields that are just by their nature kind of nebulous and like strange sometimes to describe. I'm not selling like a concrete thing. But really a lot, like the best communication actually just happens through conversation and like relationship building. So whether that's like a sales phone call about like a meditation retreat or offering a sweet preschool to some kids. It's that connection that happens. It's actually, in my experience anyway, less related to the content of what I'm saying and more about the dialogue and honestly like listening to people. Like, what is the family looking for in a school? What is this person looking for in their life? That they want to go on a meditation retreat. That's an interesting thing. And then now in my practice, my clients so far are people who, they're not like close friends of mine exactly, but they're people kind of in my peripheral social field who know me and feel some connection, and they're struggling with something that even they might not be able to put into words, and they're like, sure, I'll come sit with you and do whatever this thing is that you're saying, helps with whatever. So that's not totally writing related, but anyway, communication. Yeah.
What type of writing, speaking, or presenting do you do on a daily basis?
Writing, speaking, or representing, is that what you said?
Presenting.
On a daily basis. I haven't given truthfully a lot of thought to like the idea of professional writing in different fields. A lot of it is through email, and like, even as like a marketing and sales person for this small nonprofit, I'm emailing with people all the time, and like I sent an email last night about doing a presentation at a conference in the spring with this woman who this other guy connected me with. My friend Keith connected me to you and to this. Like, it might be a more like active and directed and focused path for some people, but as you're probably picking up on, I'm kind of like rolling along and like allowing different opportunities to pop up. I've done some more targeted outreach, yeah, again, through email. And then also just like showing up at things, because I think my communication style is more interpersonal and like human. So like going to like networking events and wellness related dinner presentation things, where I'm like attending and then I meet people there who I give my card to and they have this other thing going on and they're like, oh, would you come do this other thing? So it's a little bit like that. So showing up to stuff and talking to people and emailing, those are the most kind of daily sorts of things that I do. Yeah.
So how does your audience change the way you present?
Yeah, that comes into big play when I'm, teaching sex ed to fifth graders versus, doing this, talking to y'all, or working with, the parents of my students. The meditation writing that I was doing for the nonprofit, we had an email list of a couple thousand people who my teachers had met, on their travels or who stumbled on the website and are interested in spiritual stuff. What was your question? How does
your audience change the way you present?
the way I present? Yeah, I think just for me it's about connecting to my audience, so figuring out as I'm in front of those people or writing to those people, like what would maybe resonate with them. Yeah, trying to do some listening in like an interview setting where like I'm the one being interviewed. I haven't listened very much, but typically I would be asking questions. Yeah, I would say the biggest audience difference for me in my life has been kids versus adults. But then even like the adults that I've like worked with are from like they have a similar kind of interest of either Montessori or meditation, which are both kind of alternative, crunchy sorts of things. But yeah, just trying to connect at a human level, and sometimes that means like I'll put on like a more professional like job interview kind of vibe. With kids, sometimes like being goofy first like helps put them at ease. In certain like parent-teacher conferences, if I'm sensing that the other person's like anxious or whatever, I'll like swear or something to like loosen up the vibe. That's getting sort of specific and weird, but anyway, yeah.
Good point.
Yeah, just trying to kind of gauge in the moment, yeah, what would help bring more flow into the interaction. Yeah.
So what are your short-term goals and your long-term goals for your career right now?
Yeah, my short-term goals, part of what I've done in the last 10 years is be really busy. So that's, with my day job, but then also like hobbies and service stuff and whatever, like just super busy all the time. So truthfully, one of my goals, especially with like quitting my job thing, was to give myself some time and like not get too busy. So like protecting my downtime, my like nothing time at home is a short-term immediate goal. And it's a goal because it's hard for me. I tend to just like say yes to a bunch of stuff and like be interested in things and like go do all the things. So not doing that. I would love to get up to like maybe 10 clients a week in my private practice. So that's, not a big private practice, but I still have the schoolhouse, the Montessori school. So those are short-term goals. Stay, keep my schedule open, 10 clients. And then long-term, what are my long-term goals? It's good to think about, thank you. I get a little stuck on like wanting to have kids and then, that affects all the other things. So whenever that's able to happen for me, either adopting kids or having kids or whatever, that's a long-term thing, I guess. If they stay kids, you know, for however many years.
Interesting that you say that, because that really does affect your career a lot,
Mhm,
yeah.
mhm. Yeah, totally, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, which is not to say that I would like not also have personal goals, but like, for example, you know, the more time I have, the more energy I have to put towards my professional life. And so like right now, yeah, I'm like submitting proposals for presentations and different things and like doing that sort of stuff. And I feel like that could lead towards a few different things. Like I'm excited by working one-on-one with people in a private practice right now and like seeing how that develops. But you know, guiding meditation retreats and kind of taking like the spiritual teacher path is a possibility, or going more public speaking with it a little bit is a possibility. Taking over my mom's school is a possibility for like a long-term thing. So there's a couple possibilities for me, I think, that would satisfy that stellar nucleosynthesis epiphany moment of like how to be with people, but I don't know yet. Yeah.
So I'm like, Montessori seems very like low key and not a lot of people know about it. I know I had to look it up like the first time it came up.
Mhm.
How do you think it's like, or I don't know if it's why do you think it should be more popularly practiced?
Yeah, it does seem low key relative to the kind of idea of hierarchy and structure that we all were, you know, brought up around, just the world even, everyone, ever. There's there's a possibility for a lot of structure within it, but the idea is that allowing students to make their own choices and like practice that kind of agency and like empowerment basically over themselves helps them to develop a kind of internal discipline and internal structure that is sorry to be dramatic, but like destroyed in people submitted to obedience to authority just for the sake of obedience, you know, or like obedience out of fear. And so wanting Montessori to be more widespread is born out of like kind of seeing how the world is at the moment, where, you know, it's kind of going to hell in a handbasket a little bit, and there's like a lot of issues with abuse of power. So having an environment where humans from a really early age can start to develop that inner sense of both power over themselves and their bodies and their choices and everything, and also community and compassion and like connection to each other, and a sense even of like their place in the universe, feeling like, you know, I mean, Maria Montessori actually wrote about education for peace, and having, you know, that kind of inborn experience cultivated by the education system would allow for like a new kind of humanity that wouldn't fuck up all the time in that way. Yeah. So, yeah, I get passionate about it. Yeah.
So the similar principle is kind of the ideas that guide meditation, sort of the liberation from trauma and oppressive forces. What is that? What's the correlation between those two?
Nice. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah, I have these, you know, different trainings and backgrounds and whatever, but it really is all in the same stream. So for meditation, the kind of meditation that I practice is heart rhythm meditation. So it's like a body-based, heart-based practice, and a practice of actually like connection. So connecting to self and also connecting to other people through the practice, and connecting to kind of, you know, the whole, the universe. So by building that connection in these, you know, quiet moments, just with breath and with, you know, heartbeat and everything, is totally about, in a way, like obedience recovery for adults, you know, kind of reclaiming that inner agency and power, and like the follow your heart idea that in Montessori, we hope anyway, the children don't lose in the first place. And then, yeah, trauma is like a whole other thing where traumatic experience a lot of different kinds in a way. I mean, there's sort of capital T trauma in the way that we might think of it, like a traumatic event or, war or assault or whatever. But then there's all kinds of like, kind of cultural trauma that we all experience. So that has a lot of impact on the nervous system, which is kind of another internal rhythm that I'm studying in a training right now. And so with the heart-based meditation and then nervous system kind of trauma work, it's all leading towards that, helping people feel themselves and empowered.
And has that ever accomplished with the students, with trying to put away that kind of physical trauma and all that, mental trauma and all that from your teachings with meditation and all that? Or has it been like, kind of like an issue with the clients instead of the way you teach is,
Are you saying, are you talking about, adult students or
any kind
children?
of, like children or adults, do they ever, from when you teach, do they ever try to accomplish that goal from like put away that mental trauma?
I see what you're saying. Yeah. It's so funny. People ask me sometimes, like, do I teach meditation to kids? And I've struggled with that question. I have sometimes, but with the kids, it's less of an issue because they don't have some of that kind of, I'll just call it maybe academic trauma, just to keep it a little simple. To begin with, like they're just from whatever little tiny age, they're able to continue to follow that curious impulse and respect each other and respect the materials, and so so they grow into these like amazing, wonderful people. I mean, of course, they have a lot of other influences in their lives. So actually, for a child with a traumatic background, a Montessori environment is really excellent because they're able to kind of go at their own pace and follow their own rhythms a little bit, which trauma affects these rhythms that we live with, like our ability to be present and like alert and focused versus kind of like spacey and dissociated and that kind of thing. And then as for adults and the work, to me, I've noticed a lot, even just with my friends and people kind of in my age bracket, there's this like feeling that they have like lost their sense of purpose, or that they never had it to begin with.
Like an existential crisis kind of
Totally,
thing?
yeah, totally existential crisis everywhere, yeah.
Goodness.
Yeah, for sure. And so part of the kind of one-on-one work that I do with people is to help them. It's a little bit like roundabout. So the kinds of work that we do in session is just sort of like, it doesn't have to be talking about like big trauma or big existential stuff, but just helping them work with the rhythms of their heart and their nervous system through just like simple awareness of like sensation or image, focusing on kind of good things some of the time instead of just like constantly being problem focused, which we're all really good at. It's kind of like a certain sort of attention that begins to develop in the person that then allows them to find more of themselves and like more
Like
of
inner
the
peace
path.
kind of thing?
Yeah, a little bit like inner peace. Yep. It's not always peaceful internally, even meditating for a long time, but yeah, just that kind of capacity, the ability to like tap inwards a little bit. But I've thought about like leading a meditation retreat eventually that would be about kind of like obedience recovery, and like my vision for it ends up being a combination of like setting up a Montessori kind of space for adults, but like with a more spiritual vibe. So like obviously we're not learning like long division or whatever with materials, but having kind of some free choice and different spiritual stuff. So like kind of art supplies and yoga stuff and like guiding some meditation. So anyway, it'd be kind of a maybe strange retreat, but it's geared towards that idea.
Would you call that a goal of yours?
I would call that a goal of mine, yes. Lead meditation retreats.
What were your biggest challenges up to now?
My biggest challenges. I've run into some disagreements with like school administrations. So I taught for a school in North Carolina, where there have been actually 2 different schools where I've tried to implement a sex ed curriculum, because that's something that I do and think is important, that like kind of got to a certain point and then got shut down. And so those were some challenging moments professionally where I just felt really at odds with the administration, which was hard. Personally, my biggest challenges have been just, you know, with like relationships and making that all work, which has an impact on one's professional life to some extent. I've moved around a lot, partly like following, you know, relationships around. But anyway, yeah, some of it's been kind of existential, just like as I've been like meandering through, like there was, you know, kind of a point in my teaching career where I knew that I wasn't kind of satisfied by it personally, but it also felt like I wasn't serving the kids well enough. Like I felt a lot of like guilt and responsibility, like I wasn't doing enough, especially with the academic skill building part. Since I didn't care about it, like really like forcing yourself to do something you don't care about is like a painful, terrible experience. I'm sure you all know this already. But those kind of times where that was more pressing. Yeah, there was a thing with one of my school administrations where I like tremendously disagreed with something that they were doing, and I get really fired up about feeling protective of kids. There have been a couple of moments like that actually where I've just felt both, you know, super fired up about it and kind of powerless, like being either an assistant teacher or even, you know, a teacher in the classroom. Of course, there, you know, hierarchy is a thing. So like if your school leadership isn't doing something, yeah, that's a frustrating experience for sure. Yeah, and to get really real, a super challenging moment. My dad died a few years ago, and actually my school at the time was super supportive. I was able to take like 3 weeks off. I came home to Tucson. I was living in Denver at the time. Yeah, my school principal was like texting me sweet, supportive things, and so professionally, that was really, I was grateful for my situation. My assistant teacher just like took over the classroom. It was literally the second day of school that I had to fly home. And she was like, I got this, you go, you know, and I knew that my kids were gonna be fine, like my students and all of that. And then, you know, coming back and like randomly crying and like having to go hide in like the storage closet during the day and that kind of thing, you know, kind of navigating the like intense personal situation in my professional setting. Yeah, that was challenging, but also good. Like, you know, it's a big existential shakeup to have a big tragedy or whatever happen, and I was really grateful for my meditation practice and my meditation community at that moment. So, yeah.
Have you found that your work in meditation has like helped you like get through those kind of like roadblocks?
Yeah, big time. Yeah, it's funny even to think about kind of my life before I was meditating and like what I called my mom. Like I don't know what I would do, but yeah, definitely. So yeah, meditation is both. It becomes more difficult sometimes when there's like a lot of emotion moving, but then also it's like such a support. I mean, partly like having come from kind of a culture of like busyness, like doing all the time, you know, and like I was kind of a high achieving student and whatever. Meditation has given me permission in a way to just sit and like let myself feel things and like to be quiet, and that's a simple way in which it's been a really big support. But then of course, yeah, like my meditation community, people are like, one of my meditation mentors, like, you know, the day after my dad died, just like came and sat with me and like helped me like clear out his closet. So yeah, it's been helpful.
Based on your experiences of not pursuing your original path of wanting to teach, do you believe it's okay for students to go through college not knowing what they want to do with their life?
Oh my gosh, yeah, totally. I have, you know, my like 32-year-old roommate doesn't know what he wants to do. Yeah, I think I've been really lucky to be able to pursue a couple different things at this point. I saw something on Facebook at some point, like saying there was like, you know, these famous people that they were listing, and like they went through like all of the like weird little like career moments and like shifts that they've been through. It was like, I wish I could remember details from it. It was like Tina Fey and like Oprah and these kinds of people, and like the shitty thing they started out doing when they were like, you know, right out of high school or college versus, you know, what they became. So everyone's paths, I think, are winding. It's hard to know what it's all gonna look like, which is partly why I had trouble answering the long-term goals question. I think you know, 10 years ago, I probably would have totally had long-term goals, and I would have thought I was on that path or whatever. But at the moment that I'm at in my life, where things are just kind of, you know, unfolding, I've surrendered a little bit more to that idea that I don't always know what's next. Yeah, but especially for young people, I think just to have permission to like, yeah, experiment. Look at that, drawing on my educational psych class. Yeah, experimenting.
Any last questions? Any questions you have for us?
What do y'all want to do with your lives? What's it looking like? What year are you? You're freshmen. That's so exciting. College is the best.